Your Chrysler 300 has its lights on and the wipers are still on. If you have a Chrysler 300, it's gold, you may attend to that immediately. Now the rest of you won't remember that, I'm sure. The phrase I just used there, it sounds like a paraphrase of the psalm we just read, which is a lot of people, a lot of preachers start sermons with that verse of Scripture. Says, "May the words of my mouth," I guess that'd be the preacher part, and then the meditation of our hearts, everyone's part, always be acceptable to God. I want to tell a couple stories to begin with, just because it has to do with the idea of the heart and having our hearts be in the right place. It seems to me that's really important to God. Where your heart is seems very important. It was about 1999, 2000. I had just started working at a different church, a new church, in Heber Springs, Arkansas. And unless you live in Heber Springs, you don't know where that is. That's sort of like, Dripping Springs, Texas. Where is that? Well, this is another spring called Heber, and it's about an hour north of Little Rock. So that's all you need to know. And there's a little church there called St. Francis. I just started working there, and one of the founders of the church, his name is Hubert Threlkeld. Sounds very Scandinavian, I think. And he was an elderly person, and his wife died right within a few months when I got there. And he loved her very much. And outside the church there was a little church cemetery. Now, Heber Springs is a pretty small town, out kind of in the middle of nowhere anyway, and this church was on the outside of town, so it was kind of in a wooded area. It was actually technically called St. Francis in the Pines. So there are lots of pine trees around. And by the way, I got in big trouble for cutting down a few pine trees, I must say. I said, they can't see the sign to see the church. Don't you want to? We're in the woods. We want people to come here, not be lost in the woods. Anyway, that's another story. But when Hubert's wife died, she was buried out in the little church cemetery. And this cemetery was not with gravestones. It was actually only where people's ashes went. And we put them in the ground under these stones that were part of a path. So everyone was buried in this garden-like area under these stones out behind the church. And Hubert loved his wife so much. He was really broken up by her death. And he asked, and he said, "I've got a great idea, David. Why don't we build this great stone fence along the side of the church next to the cemetery thing, or the columbarium?" And I said, "It's going to cost a lot of money, isn't it?" It was a long boundary. They had a lot of property. He said, "Yeah, maybe. I've already looked into it." I said, "Oh, no." So he said, "It's going to cost $20,000. But I'll donate most of the money." So now I'm kind of in a jam, because I'm not sure we really want a big fence alongside the church. So I go ask the vestry. I say, "Vestry, here's the deal. Hubert would like to sort of add to the beauty of the church garden and cemetery by building this stone wall along the border." And vestry wasn't sure they wanted to do that, especially spend all the money on it. So I had to go to Hubert and say, "Hubert, I know the intentions of your heart is to honor your wife by making this a beautiful place. And you think the wall will make it more beautiful, or the fence. But the vestry thinks that the wall or the fence will look like we're trying to keep people away, keep the neighbors out. We want to build a wall or a fence." So the vestry has one idea in mind, right? The wall means separation and keep people out. Hubert has the idea that the wall, like fence, is going to honor his wife. Both people are speaking from their heart, right? They're trying to do the right thing. One says, I love my wife. The other says, I love my church. Oh my gosh. So it was really tough. I said, Hubert, could we spend this money on something else? He was not real happy with that. But we didn't build the fence or the wall. And Hubert didn't come to church for a long time. And he finally came back and said, I'm sorry, I was just really in grief over my wife, and I wanted to do something good. So I know, it was your heart. Your heart was just in the right place. But we did need a fence right there. So what's in the heart usually is expressed outwardly. So a simple fence, you think it's just a fence or a wall. But it really represents something much deeper because it comes from the heart. You can find that example in lots of things. So it seems to me that, as we said at the beginning of our service today, when we read the Ten Commandments, or we re-spoke them, reframed them, and we said, God, incline our hearts to keep this law. We said it 10 times in a row. Incline our hearts to keep this law. Because it seems like unless the heart is involved, unless it comes from the heart, the commandments don't really ever get done. Or it's really harder to do them because they're not part of who you are, part of what you want to do. So we ask God, God, help us to want to do these things. Help our heart to be aligned with your heart. Another example comes from this, for me, really strong example of how the outward things, either we say or do or build, are reflected of something inside of us. I've been to a lot of different funerals, lots of burials, and I've done quite a few, of course, as being part of a church that does those things. And have you all ever been to a graveside funeral at Fort Sam Houston? It's a military cemetery, and always as part of that ceremony, when they put that person's remains in their last place, there's an honor guard, and sometimes they'll do the fire rifles off as a salute or an honoring of the person's military service and their life. And they also fold a flag. They take an American flag, and part of the honor guard will fold it in front of the surviving family, and they present the flag to the family, often a spouse. In fact, we had this flag ceremony at the last funeral that was here, at Bob Bridges' funeral. Before anything starts, two soldiers or servicemen stood in front of us up here, and they fold the flag with great care and with almost excruciating detail. And they know, they have done this a million times, and they practice it over and over so that there's not a wrinkle anywhere. And the creases are perfect. And they inspect the flag, and they fold it in the form of a triangle, and they look at every edge, and one presents it to the other and says, as if to show the man, is this correct? And the guy inspects it, every corner. And then they salute the flag. And then one person will come to the surviving spouse or family member and get on one knee and present the flag. And then they'll say, a paraphrase, they'll say something like, from a grateful nation, thank you for the service of your spouse. Very dramatic. And you could say to yourself, oh, it's just a ritual, just a flag. I'm glad they do it, but it's not that big a deal. But it really represents the American people and the heart of the American people saying thank you to one family. It's an interior thing represented in an exterior ceremony. And everyone's dead quiet when that flag's being presented. Because they know, and everybody knows, this is not just a flag. This is something from the heart of the Americans giving thanks to one of their servicemen. It's an internal thing represented in a symbol of a flag folded. So, when Jesus goes into the temple and he sees people in the temple who are doing the buying and the selling of animals that are meant to be used in the temple, by the way. They were meant to be there. It wasn't just a marketplace. They were meant to be part of the temple services. Doves and sheep and cows and people exchanging money because that had to be done the right way. It's meant to reflect something of the internal heart of the people. And Jesus says, your heart is not represented here. You guys are just buying and selling stuff. You guys are just trying to make a buck, and it's commerce, and it's the marketplace, and it's lost all connection to what it was meant to be. So why don't you just get out of here? This is my Father's house, and you've made it look like it was H-E-B, Walmart, and Lowe's all put together. And then the disciples said, we remembered he would be very zealous, or a great zeal for his Father's house would consume him. And you could say, well, it's just a religious place, the temple, what's the big deal? Apparently for Jesus, it was a very big deal that people's hearts were in the right place. And the people who are out there selling and buying and trading and making a day's living, their heart not in the right place. You've made this religious place look like a marketplace. So he's very fired up about that. So, I share all these stories with you just to remind us all how important to God the inner is. Your inner intentions, your heart is like the most important thing to God. The most important thing. And your inner life will be reflected in how you live. If the heart is right, the 10 Commandments will flow out just fine. You won't have to memorize them. They'll be written on your heart. It's funny, when I take care of the altar behind me here, I might get this right. I hope I get it right. The purple thing on top of the cup and the plate, I think it's called the pall. Like a funeral pall, and you put that covering over top the chalice and the paten. And you could say to yourself, well, it's just plate and cup. Just do the dishes and take care of it. But every time I put the pall back on top of the chalice and the paten, or the cup and the plate, I remember the guys who were folding the flag. And those guys are so precise because they want to honor the person who has died. So I try to put the pall back on just so. Maybe I look a little fussy up there, primping and doing this and that. But I just want the inner intentions of all of our hearts to be represented in how we put the altar back together. Jesus always wants the inner and the outer to match up. The good things in your heart to be expressed. And on the flip side, if there's anything not so good on the inside, it will also get expressed. We're doing a class right now in between services. It's called Embracing Forgiveness, and it comes with a set curriculum. So I didn't invent it. But we just had a class today and last week. It said this, that if like resentment or bitterness or brokenness or anger is kept in your heart and you have no way to discharge it or get rid of it or resolve it, it ends up spilling over into other things, and it does kind of come out. Because the heart always gets expressed outwardly, somehow, sometime, somewhere. So forgiveness seems to be so important because if it's something that's stuck inside you, it does end up coming out. That's why Jesus is so positive and so affirming that he wants to get people's hearts right and then the outward things will come. And when there's some disconnection between the heart and how you act, that's when he's really not very excited. Jesus, it seems, loves sinners, but the definition of hypocrisy, where the inner and the outer don't match up, that's what he was really fired up about a lot of times. Sinners, okay, we can work with that. Hypocrisy, hard to work with. So, I'll just give you one quick example. It happens all the time, and I feel so sorry. But I am like the poster child for if I have something inside of me that isn't like I'm mad about something or I'm resentful or something hasn't gone my way, it gets transferred outwardly onto who, do you think? I'll give you a clue. They walk on all fours. Those poor dogs. I don't have much family to live with, so the nearest living being always gets the brunt of my ill humor. Hopefully not horribly, but I feel sorry. I always have to go back and apologize. I'm so sorry. It wasn't you really. It just you were kind of bugging me, and the whole thing happened. And yeah, it was the other person. And anyway, what's on the inside does kind of come out. So, on this cold, rainy Sunday in Lent, as you look at the story of Jesus in the temple and casting out the people selling the animals, Jesus is really most concerned that their hearts are not in it. And they're turning the temple into a place of just commerce. And I can tell from my own experience that the outside and the inside are meant to match up. And what's on the inside eventually comes out. Unfortunately for my dog, but that's what I have to deal with. So, let's end where we began. When I quoted you from the Psalms. And we said, may the words of my mouth and then the meditation of all of our hearts always be acceptable to you, O God. You are our strength and our Redeemer. Let's all make the effort to keep our hearts right and have it match up with our outward lives. I offer this to you in the name of God, God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.